It was a bright, warm morning on the outskirts of a quiet village in rural China. The sun had just begun to climb higher into the sky, spreading its golden light over the fields and the small, peaceful ranch that sat beside the winding river. The rancher, a middle-aged man named Li Wei, had already been up for hours. He moved with the ease of someone who had spent years working with his hands, tending to the animals, and caring for the land that had been in his family for generations. His life was simple, yet full of routines that gave him comfort. Every day began with feeding the animals, checking fences, and walking along the riverbank to ensure that everything was in order. It was a life of quiet satisfaction, one where he found peace in the rhythm of the work and the gentle sounds of nature. On this particular morning, however, the calm was about to be broken. Not far from the ranch, two young girls were wandering along the edge of the river. They were identical twins, no older than 11, visiting the countryside with their aunt, who had been called away briefly for some errands in the nearby town. The twins, May and Lin, were lively, curious, and inseparable. Everywhere one went, the other followed. Their small hands often clasped together as they explored the world around them. Their laughter carried across the water, mingling with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds. The river itself was usually calm in the mornings. It meandered slowly through the valley, reflecting the blue of the sky and the green of the trees along its banks. But that day, unseen currents from upstream had begun to pick up, unseen whirlpools forming beneath the gentle surface. It was subtle at first, just a faint pull in the water that even an experienced eye might miss. To the twins, it seemed like a perfect place to play. They skipped stones and splashed their feet in the shallow edge, laughing whenever the water sprayed them. For them, the river was a magical place, a little world of adventure waiting to be discovered. Meanwhile, Li Wei had finished his morning chores and was taking a short walk along the bank, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. He liked to observe the small changes in the landscape, noticing the way the sunlight hit the trees or the sound of the wind through the grass. It was a routine he cherished because it allowed him to connect with the land he loved. As he walked, he heard a faint, unusual sound that made him pause. At first, it was difficult to place a combination of splashing and what sounded like frightened voices. His instincts immediately sharpened. Li Wei was no stranger to the river and knew its hidden dangers. Something about the sound set off an alarm in his mind. He quickened his pace and soon spotted the twins, standing very close to the water's edge. They were laughing, but the laughter had a nervous edge, and the ripples around them suggested that the water was stronger than it appeared. In a single moment, the river seemed to pull one of the girls slightly forward. She stumbled, and her small foot slipped into the deeper water. May instinctively grabbed her sister's hand, but the current was faster than they could manage. Within seconds, both girls were struggling, being dragged by the river's force. Li Wei did not hesitate. Without thinking of his own safety, he ran down the bank toward them. His heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of fear and determination. He had faced many dangers on the ranch over the years, but the thought of children being swept away by the river filled him with urgency he had never known before. As he reached the water's edge, he could see the panic on the twins' faces. Their eyes were wide with fear, and their tiny bodies were flailing as they tried to stay above the water. The river, which had seemed so calm and inviting a few moments ago, had turned into a powerful, merciless force. Li Wei dove in without hesitation. The water was cold and strong, but he had grown up around rivers and knew how to handle himself in the current. He swam with powerful strokes, reaching the twins just as the river tried to pull them further downstream. He grabbed May first, wrapping one arm around her small frame, and then Lin, holding them both as tightly as he could. The twins clung to him, crying and gasping for breath. Li Wei focused on getting them to the shore, every muscle straining against the relentless pull of the river. It felt like an eternity. But finally, he managed to pull them onto the bank, collapsing onto the ground with them. For a few moments, none of them spoke. The twins were shaking from the cold and fear, and Li Wei was exhausted from the effort of keeping them safe. The river continued to flow beside them, indifferent to the drama that had just occurred on its banks. Slowly, Li Wei wrapped them in dry blankets he kept in his ranch house for emergencies. The twins huddled together, shivering, and their tears began to subside as they realized they were safe. Then, something unexpected happened. Through their trembling voices, the twins asked a question that startled Li Wei. "Will you stay if we take off our clothes?" The words were innocent in their tone but strange in the situation, a confusing mixture of fear, trust, and disorientation. Li Wei froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. It was clear that the girls were traumatized and did not fully understand what they were asking. He realized that their words were likely a way of testing whether he was truly there to help. A strange expression of the confusion and vulnerability they felt after the terrifying experience. Li Wei took a deep breath and focused on their well-being. He spoke gently, reassuring them that they were safe and that nothing bad would happen. He helped them dry off and gave them warm drinks to help their bodies recover from the cold. The twins began to calm down, their fear slowly being replaced by a fragile sense of trust. They still clung to each other, but their questions became simpler, less alarming, showing that they were starting to feel safe again. As they rested on the riverbank, Li Wei kept a careful watch on the surroundings. He knew that children in shock could behave unpredictably, and he wanted to make sure they were fully safe until their guardian returned. He reflected on the fragility of life, how quickly a moment of joy and play could turn into danger, and how important it was to act decisively when someone's safety was at risk. His own heart slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But the memory of the river's strength and the twins' small hands grasping for help would stay with him forever. By the time the sun was higher in the sky, the twins' guardian had arrived, alerted by the local villagers who had seen the commotion. Li Wei explained what had happened, carefully recounting the rescue without judgment or exaggeration. The guardian was grateful and relieved, hugging the twins tightly and thanking Li Wei for his bravery. The twins themselves were exhausted but safe, their small faces showing a mixture of lingering fear and relief. Before leaving, the guardian made sure the twins understood that they could trust kind strangers and that it was important to stay close to adults near dangerous places like the river. Li Wei waved as they walked away, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him. He returned to his ranch, his clothes still damp from the river, but his heart warmed by the knowledge that he had saved 2 lives that morning. As he resumed his routine, tending to the animals and checking the fences, Li Wei thought about the unpredictable nature of life. The river would continue to flow, indifferent to the events that had taken place on its banks. But for him, the morning would remain a vivid memory, a reminder of courage, compassion, and the fragile beauty of human connection. The twins' strange question would stay in his mind, a symbol of how fear and trust can sometimes blend in ways we do not fully understand, especially in the minds of children. By evening, the ranch was quiet again. The sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Li Wei sat on the porch of his small home, listening to the gentle rustle of the trees and the distant sound of the river. Life on the ranch returned to its usual calm, but he knew that the events of that morning had left an indelible mark on his heart. He felt grateful for the opportunity to help, and quietly, he made a promise to always be ready to act when someone needed him, no matter how ordinary or extraordinary the situation might seem. And so, the day ended as it had begun, with the soft sounds of nature and the quiet peace of a life lived close to the land, but with a memory of courage and compassion that would never fade. The morning of the rescue had left the rancher, Li Wei, with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. His body ached from the struggle in the river, but his heart felt light, knowing that the twins, May and Lin, were safe. Even as he returned to his daily chores, he could not shake the image of their small hands reaching out, their terrified eyes staring into the water, and the strange, confusing question they had asked him afterward. He knew that children could react to frightening events in ways adults did not always understand. Their words were not malicious. They were a reflection of fear and shock, a strange attempt to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned dangerous. Li Wei's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his small wooden door. It was the twins' aunt, hurrying across the yard with a worried expression. She had heard from a neighbor about the incident and had rushed back to find her nieces. Relief washed over her face when she saw the girls safe and wrapped in blankets, sitting beside Li Wei with their clothes still damp but dry enough to be comfortable. She hugged them tightly, her voice trembling as she thanked Li Wei over and over. Mei and Lin clung to their aunt, their small bodies shaking, not from the cold anymore but from the lingering fear of what had happened. Li Wei offered warm tea and soft towels, trying to help them feel more comfortable. The twins, though exhausted, looked up at him occasionally, their eyes still wide with the echo of fear. The rancher realized that their trust was fragile now, and it would take time for them to feel safe again. He wanted to be patient, giving them space while also ensuring they understood that they were secure. The aunt sat with them for a moment, letting them calm down before she spoke. "Girls," she said gently, "you are safe now. You are with people who care about you. Li Wei saved you. Do you understand?" The twins nodded slowly, their lips pressed together, as if testing whether her words were true. They had just experienced the terrifying power of the river and had been unsure if they would survive. Now, safe on dry land, they were beginning to realize that danger could pass and that kind people existed even in moments of fear. Li Wei watched quietly, not wanting to interrupt. He had learned over the years that sometimes the best way to help children recover from trauma was to let them express themselves in their own way. Some children would cry, some would be silent, and some would ask strange or confusing questions. This was natural. The twins' earlier question about taking off their clothes, though odd, was likely a response to their vulnerability and their need for reassurance. Li Wei had handled it as best as he could, but he knew the children's emotional journey had just begun. After the initial relief, Li Wei suggested taking the twins inside his small house to rest. It was a simple home, with a few rooms, a fireplace, and wooden floors. But it was warm and welcoming. The girls followed hesitantly, holding their aunt's hand, peeking around with curiosity mixed with caution. Li Wei showed them the dry blankets and fresh clothes he had prepared, along with cups of warm tea to soothe their shaken bodies. He spoke softly, explaining that they could take their time, that there was no rush, and that they were completely safe. The twins slowly began to relax. Mei, the slightly bolder of the two, sat down by the fireplace, rubbing her arms and staring into the flames. Lin, quieter and more hesitant, curled up on a blanket nearby. They began to whisper to each other, likely talking about the river and the fear they had felt. Li Wei listened from a distance, careful not to intrude, but ready to respond if needed. Their aunt sat nearby, holding a cup of tea, observing the girls, and trying to comfort them with gentle words. Eventually, Mei turned toward Li Wei, her eyes searching. "Are you really going to stay?" she asked softly, her voice hesitant. Lin peeked out from behind her sister, nodding. Li Wei understood that this was not a demand but a question of trust. The girls had just faced a life-threatening situation, and their minds were trying to find stability. He smiled gently and nodded. "Yes, I will stay. You are safe here. Nothing bad will happen." Hearing his calm, steady response seemed to ease the tension in the girls. They began to speak more freely, sharing little details about their morning before the incident. Mei mentioned the way the sun had glinted off the water, how the stones near the river had been smooth and shiny. Lin spoke of the birds she had seen, and how she had wanted to catch one in her hands. Their aunt listened quietly, occasionally asking questions and offering comfort. It was a small step toward helping them process the frightening experience. As the hours passed, Li Wei reflected on the nature of fear and courage. Children often faced situations without the experience or knowledge adults had, yet they also possessed a natural resilience. Mei and Lin had survived a dangerous river, and their trust in him had begun to take root. He understood that what they needed now was patience, compassion, and reassurance, not judgment. Their odd question earlier was simply part of their recovery, an attempt to understand the world and the safety of those around them. The day wore on, and the ranch became a place of quiet recovery. Li Wei tended to his animals briefly, checking that everything was in order, but his mind was never far from the twins. He knew that returning to the riverbank, seeing the familiar landscape, could trigger memories of the frightening incident. He made a mental note to speak with their aunt about guiding the girls carefully if they wished to visit the river again. Safety and understanding were paramount now. Later, the aunt and the twins shared a simple meal prepared by Li Wei. The girls were still shy but began to eat. Encouraged by the warmth of the kitchen and the presence of people who cared, Li Wei watched them, noting how the smallest comforts, warm food, blankets, and kind words, could make a significant difference to children recovering from trauma. He spoke gently about the day, keeping his voice calm, and encouraging them to share any feelings or thoughts. Gradually, laughter returned. Soft and hesitant at first, then more natural, as the girls realized they were truly safe. In the evening, Li Wei suggested a small walk outside to help the girls stretch their legs and feel connected to the world again. They walked carefully along the edge of the ranch, holding hands with their aunt, their eyes wide with curiosity, but no longer clouded with fear. Li Wei pointed out the small details of the ranch, the way the sunlight fell on the leaves, the gentle movement of the animals, and the soft rustle of the wind. It was a quiet lesson in finding beauty and peace after danger, helping the girls reconnect with the world in a safe and controlled way. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, Li Wei reflected on the extraordinary nature of that day. The river had shown its power, a reminder that nature could be both beautiful and dangerous. Yet it had also revealed something more profound, the ability of humans to act with courage, kindness, and empathy when others were in need. The twins' trust, fragile but growing, was a testament to the resilience of children and the importance of compassion in times of fear. By the time the night settled over the ranch, May and Lin were ready to sleep. They were exhausted, but their faces showed signs of relief and a growing sense of security. Li Wei and their aunt ensured they were comfortable, covered with warm blankets and lying close to each other. Still holding hands as they often did, their breathing slowly became steady, a quiet rhythm of rest after a day of terror and recovery. Li Wei sat by the window, looking out at the river that had caused so much fear that morning. Its surface was calm again, reflecting the moonlight and the stars above. He understood that the river's power had not changed, but neither had the potential for courage and compassion. He felt grateful for the chance to help and proud that he had acted without hesitation when the twins were in danger. Before going to bed himself, Li Wei thought about the strange question the twins had asked earlier, about staying if they took off their clothes. He now understood it as part of the process of trauma, a childlike test of trust and safety. He smiled quietly, realizing that every moment of fear and confusion could be met with patience, kindness, and understanding. And so, the night settled over the ranch. The twins slept peacefully for the first time that day, their aunt beside them, and Li Wei watched from the window, knowing that the events of the morning had forged a quiet bond of trust and gratitude. Though the river had been dangerous and the situation frightening, the day had also shown the beauty of human connection and the strength of compassion in the face of fear. The morning after the rescue, Li Wei woke early, as he always did. The ranch was quiet, with only the soft sounds of birds and the occasional lowing of cattle filling the air. He felt a gentle ache in his muscles from the previous day's effort, but there was also a sense of satisfaction that he had never experienced before. Saving May and Lin had been frightening, exhausting, and yet profoundly rewarding. As he stepped outside to check the animals, he thought about the twins and their aunt, wondering how they were feeling after such a terrifying ordeal. Inside the small house, the twins had woken early, but remained unusually quiet. Their aunt had prepared a light breakfast, but neither May nor Lin had much appetite. They sat close together, holding hands, occasionally glancing at one another and then back at their aunt, as if seeking reassurance. The strange question they had asked Li Wei the previous day lingered in their minds, but in the calm of the morning, their confusion was giving way to curiosity. They were beginning to understand that not everyone was dangerous, that some people could be trusted, and that help could come from strangers in unexpected ways. Li Wei entered the house quietly, carrying a basket of fresh eggs and vegetables he had collected from the farm. He greeted the girls softly, making sure his presence felt safe rather than imposing. "Good morning, girls," he said, smiling gently. "I brought breakfast for everyone." The twins looked up at him, their eyes still wide but less fearful than before. May gave a small nod, while Lin remained more cautious, peeking from behind her sister's shoulder. Li Wei set the basket on the table and began preparing the food, all the while speaking softly to them, explaining what he was doing and asking about their comfort. As the twins ate, the aunt spoke about the importance of processing their feelings. She explained that sometimes, after a frightening event, children could feel confused, scared, or even behave in ways that seemed unusual. May listened attentively, her small brow furrowed in concentration, while Lin nodded silently. Li Wei observed, realizing how important it was to combine patience, understanding, and gentle guidance. The twins needed reassurance, not scolding. Attention, not pressure. After breakfast, Li Wei suggested a small walk around the ranch to help the girls regain confidence. The twins hesitated at first, their memories of the river still fresh and frightening, but with encouragement from their aunt and Li Wei's calm presence, they agreed. The morning air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of earth and grass. The twins held hands, walking carefully along the paths that Li Wei had cleared for his animals. They looked around with wonder, noticing details they had missed the day before: the way sunlight danced through the leaves, the gentle ripple of a small stream feeding into the river, and the patterns of birds moving across the sky. Li Wei spoke gently as they walked. He told them stories about the ranch, about how the river could be both helpful and dangerous, and about the animals he cared for. The twins listened quietly, their fears gradually giving way to curiosity. May, the braver of the two, began asking questions about the animals, wanting to know how they lived and what they ate. Lin, usually more reserved, started to smile, her interest piqued by the stories of life on the ranch. The walk became a lesson in trust, showing the twins that the world could be safe, predictable, and beautiful if approached carefully and with awareness. Returning from the walk, the twins settled near the fireplace, while Li Wei's aunt and he prepared lunch. The twins' conversation gradually became more natural, though still cautious. They asked questions about Li Wei's life, his work, and the river. Their curiosity was a sign of recovery, a gentle emergence from the fear that had dominated the previous day. Li Wei answered with care, speaking honestly about the river's dangers but also emphasizing how preparation, awareness, and kindness could keep people safe. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the twins' aunt suggested that they rest, while she spoke privately with Li Wei. They moved to a quiet room, leaving the girls to nap peacefully. The aunt's expression was serious, but there was gratitude in her eyes. "Li Wei," she said softly, "I cannot thank you enough for what you did. You saved them. But I also need to understand how they might be feeling now. Their question yesterday, it was strange, and I want to make sure they are okay." Li Wei nodded, understanding her concern. "I think it came from shock and fear," he said gently. "They were testing trust, trying to understand if I would stay and protect them no matter what. Children often ask things that seem odd after a frightening experience. They are not malicious. They were not malicious. They are trying to process what happened." The aunt listened carefully, realizing that the twins' behavior was not unusual in the context of trauma. She felt relief that Li Wei understood their needs and could help guide them gently. Later, a local doctor was called to visit the ranch. The doctor had experience with children and trauma and spent time with May and Lin, asking simple questions and observing their reactions. He explained to their aunt and to Li Wei that children often express fear and confusion in unusual ways after a near-death experience. Their behaviors could include repetitive questions, strange statements, or testing boundaries, all as part of coping. The twins had been fortunate to have someone like Li Wei present calm, patient, and kind, which would greatly aid their recovery. The doctor's visit provided reassurance, and the twins began to feel safer, knowing that adults were understanding and supportive. Li Wei took it upon himself to engage with them in gentle activities, helping them rebuild a sense of normalcy. They played simple games in the yard, watched small animals in the pens, and even practiced skipping stones in a shallow, safe part of the stream under careful supervision. Each moment of laughter and curiosity was a small step away from fear, a reminder that trust could be rebuilt with patience and care. Throughout the day, Li Wei noticed the subtle changes in the twins' demeanor. Mei began to ask questions freely, sometimes forgetting to hold her sister's hand tightly. Lin, too, started to explore cautiously, stepping away from her sister to touch the leaves or watch a bird land on a fence. The twins were beginning to reclaim a sense of independence, balanced by the safety provided by Li Wei and their aunt. This slow progress was encouraging, a sign that they were starting to heal emotionally as well as physically. By late afternoon, the twins were eager to help Li Wei with small tasks around the ranch. They fed chickens, collected eggs, and carried small bundles of vegetables, all under careful supervision. Each activity was designed not only to occupy them, but also to restore confidence and a sense of competence. Mei giggled as a chicken ran past her feet, while Lin carefully placed an egg into the basket. Proud of her careful handling, Li Wei smiled, realizing that these small accomplishments were helping the twins regain trust in themselves and in the world around them. As evening approached, the twins' aunt suggested a quiet discussion to help them express their thoughts about the river incident. Sitting near the fireplace, she encouraged them to talk about their feelings, fears, and questions. Mei spoke first, her voice small but clear. She described the fear of being swept away, the panic of feeling helpless, and the relief when Li Wei reached them. Lin added her perspective, sharing how cold and frightening the water had been, and how she had clung to her sister to stay safe. The conversation was a breakthrough, allowing the twins to verbalize their experience rather than acting it out in confusion or fear. Li Wei listened quietly, providing occasional words of encouragement and reassurance. He reminded the twins that it was normal to feel scared after such an event, and that talking about it helped their minds and hearts heal. He emphasized that they were safe now, that adults could be trusted to protect them, and that their courage in facing the river had been remarkable. His words, calm and kind, offered stability and comfort, strengthening the bond of trust that had begun the previous day. Night fell over the ranch, and the twins were ready for bed. They had come a long way in their emotional recovery. Though the memory of the river remained vivid, Li Wei helped tuck them in, ensuring they were warm, comfortable, and close to their aunt. He reminded them gently that it was okay to feel afraid sometimes, but that they were not alone and had people who cared deeply for their safety. The twins nodded, their small hands gripping their blankets, comforted by his presence. Before retiring for the night, Li Wei walked outside to the riverbank. The water was calm, reflecting the moonlight and stars above. He thought about the day, about the courage of the twins, and about the strange, confusing question they had asked. He now understood that their question was not about misbehavior or misunderstanding, but about trust, a child's way of testing the world after an experience that had shaken their sense of safety. He felt gratitude that he had been able to respond with patience and care, and he silently resolved to continue supporting them in any way possible. As he returned to his home, the quiet ranch seemed even more peaceful than before. The events of the past 2 days had reminded him of the fragile nature of life, the importance of empathy, and the strength that kindness could provide. Mei and Lin had survived the river, but they had also begun to recover emotionally, learning that the world, though sometimes dangerous, could also be filled with people who acted with courage and compassion. Li Wei reflected on how small actions could have profound impacts. A timely dive into the river, a gentle word, a warm blanket, and a patient presence, all of these had contributed to the twins' recovery. The incident had reminded him of the importance of staying calm in emergencies, of acting with clarity and kindness, and of understanding the needs of children in moments of fear. He knew that this day would remain etched in his memory forever, a testament to human connection and the power of empathy. And so, the night settled over the ranch. The twins slept peacefully, the aunt beside them, and Li Wei sat quietly by the window, watching the river flow under the moonlight. Though the memory of the river would not fade, Neither would the sense of hope, trust, and courage that had been born from the morning's events. The day had been a journey from fear to safety, from confusion to understanding, from isolation to connection, and it was a journey that none of them would ever forget. The next morning, the ranch was calm under the soft light of dawn. Birds sang their usual songs, and the gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the fresh scent of earth and grass. Li Wei had been awake for some time, as was his habit, walking quietly along the fence line and checking on his animals. The past few days had been extraordinary, filled with fear, courage, and unexpected responsibility. The memory of Mei and Lin in the river, their small hands reaching out for help, stayed vividly in his mind. Yet now, as he observed the peaceful landscape, he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his actions had made a lasting difference in their lives. Inside the small house, the twins were awake, calmer than the previous days but still carrying the shadow of the river in their minds. Their aunt, sitting beside them at the breakfast table, encouraged them to speak about their feelings. Mei began first, her voice gentle but steady. She talked about the fear she had felt when the current had taken hold, about the cold water and the panic that had gripped her body. Lin followed, adding her own words about clinging to her sister, the swirling water, and the confusion she had felt. Their aunt listened attentively, nodding, offering quiet encouragement and reassurance. Li Wei entered the room with a basket of fresh bread and eggs from the farm, setting it on the table with a warm smile. "Good morning, girls," he said softly. "I brought breakfast. Eat well today. You need energy for the day." The twins looked at him, their eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and curiosity. The bond that had begun during the rescue was slowly solidifying, and their trust in him had grown. Mei reached out to take a piece of bread, and Lin followed, still watching him cautiously, but with less fear. Li Wei understood that patience and consistent kindness were essential in helping the twins fully recover. After breakfast, Li Wei suggested a walk toward the river, but this time, not to play or explore, but to understand it safely. He wanted the twins to see the river as a part of nature, not just as a frightening force. With careful guidance, they walked along a safe, shallow area, with Li Wei explaining how rivers worked, why currents could be strong, and how people could enjoy them safely. He emphasized caution, respect, and observation, showing them that knowledge and care could transform fear into understanding. The twins listened closely, absorbing every word. Mei, always eager to learn, asked questions about the animals in the water and the fish that swam beneath the surface. Lin, quieter but attentive, watched the movement of the water, noting how the sunlight created patterns on the surface. Li Wei encouraged them to notice details, to understand the river's rhythm, and to appreciate its beauty without being reckless. The experience was both educational and healing, allowing them to reclaim their connection to nature without fear. Returning to the ranch, the twins helped Li Wei with small chores, an activity designed to restore confidence and normalcy. They fed chickens, collected eggs, and helped water the plants. Each task was a simple success, reinforcing their sense of safety and competence. Mei laughed as a chicken ran past her feet, while Lin carefully placed an egg in the basket, proud of her careful handling. Li Wei encouraged them with gentle words, emphasizing the importance of patience and care, and praising their efforts. The twins were slowly regaining their confidence and learning that the world could be safe and predictable when approached with attention and care. Later in the day, the twins' aunt suggested a quiet moment for reflection. They gathered around the fireplace, and Li Wei joined them. The girls began to ask questions, some about the river, some about the ranch, and some about Li Wei himself. Their curiosity was a sign of emotional recovery. Mei asked about how he had known where to find them, how he had managed to hold them both at once, and what he felt during the rescue. Lin asked about the animals and the plants, wanting to understand the life around them. Li Wei answered with honesty and warmth, sharing his experiences while emphasizing that courage could take many forms, and that kindness and presence were as important as bravery in any rescue. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, the twins showed signs of being tired, but also happy. They had played, learned, and experienced small victories in regaining confidence. Li Wei and their aunt prepared a simple meal, and the girls ate eagerly, their laughter returning naturally. The day had been filled with gentle teaching, reassurance, and small accomplishments that slowly healed the trauma of the river incident. The twins were beginning to feel a sense of normalcy, and their trust in adults, in kindness, and in their own ability to navigate the world was growing stronger. After dinner, Li Wei and the twins sat outside, watching the sunset over the river. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting on the water and creating a scene of quiet beauty. The twins were quiet at first, simply observing the colors and the movement of the river. Then Mei spoke softly. "The river is beautiful, but it's also scary. I understand now why you were so careful." Lin nodded, adding, "It is strong, but it can be safe if we are careful." Li Wei smiled, proud of their insight. The words reflected their emotional growth, their understanding of both nature and their own feelings. Night approached, and the twins were ready for bed. Li Wei helped them prepare, ensuring they were comfortable, warm, and safe. Their aunt stayed close, holding them and offering reassurance. As they drifted off to sleep, their small hands holding each other, Li Wei reflected on the journey of the past days, from terror in the river to the slow rebuilding of trust, confidence, and understanding. The twins had shown remarkable resilience. He felt honored to have played a role in their recovery and grateful that he had acted decisively when they needed help. Once the twins were asleep, Li Wei sat outside alone, gazing at the river under the moonlight. Its surface was calm, reflecting the stars above, and its gentle murmur filled the night with a soothing rhythm. He thought about the lessons of the past days, the unpredictability of life, the importance of courage, and the profound impact of small acts of kindness. The twins' question, from the day of the rescue, strange and confusing at the time, now seemed less mysterious. It had been a reflection of fear, trust, and a child's attempt to understand safety in a world that suddenly felt dangerous. Li Wei understood that this incident, though frightening, had strengthened connections between humans. Trust had been built through action and presence. Courage had been demonstrated through effort and empathy, and healing had begun through patience and understanding. The river, though still powerful and potentially dangerous, had become a symbol of both fear and respect, showing that nature demanded attention and care, and that humanity could respond with compassion and strength. The following morning, the twins were preparing to return home. Their aunt had arranged transportation, and they would soon leave the ranch. Mei and Lin were quiet but attentive, taking in the surroundings one last time. Li Wei helped them pack small belongings and ensured that they had everything they needed for the journey. Their faces showed gratitude, a mixture of relief, understanding, and fondness for the time spent at the ranch. They hugged their aunt tightly, and then each gave Li Wei a small, careful hug, a silent gesture of thanks and trust. Before leaving, the twins' aunt spoke to Li Wei with deep appreciation. "You have done more than save them from the river," she said softly. "You have helped them feel safe again, taught them courage, and shown them that there are people who care. Thank you." Li Wei smiled, humbly acknowledging her words. He replied, "I did what anyone should do. The important thing is that they are safe and learning to trust again." The twins waved as they departed, their small hands raised, and Li Wei watched until the vehicle disappeared from view. After they left, the ranch felt quiet once more. Li Wei returned to his daily chores, but the experience had left a lasting impression on him. He thought about the power of kindness, the importance of quick action, and the resilience of children in the face of fear. The river would continue to flow, indifferent to human drama, but for him, it would always carry the memory of Mei and Lin, of fear transformed into trust, and of courage demonstrated through presence and care. Days turned into weeks, but Li Wei never forgot the twins. Occasionally, letters arrived from their family, sharing updates on their well-being, their schoolwork, and their continued curiosity about the world. They mentioned how they talked about the river incident, how they had learned from the experience, and how Li Wei's calm, brave actions had inspired them. Each letter was a reminder of the profound and lasting impact of human connection, courage, and compassion. Li Wei reflected on how ordinary days could turn extraordinary in the blink of an eye. A river that seemed peaceful, two children unaware of its hidden dangers, and a single act of bravery had created a story that would remain in his heart forever. He understood that life was fragile, that fear was natural, and that kindness and empathy could transform the most frightening moments into lasting lessons of hope and trust. And so, the ranch returned to its quiet rhythm, the animals grazing peacefully, the trees swaying gently in the wind, and the river flowing with a calm, steady rhythm. Li Wei continued his life, tending to his animals, walking along the banks, and carrying in his heart the memory of the twins, their courage, and the delicate beauty of trust restored. The world, though sometimes dangerous, could also be safe, filled with people ready to act with compassion, and every small act of care could leave a lasting mark. In the end, the story of the river, the twins, and the brave rancher became a quiet testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of empathy, and the enduring bonds that form when courage meets kindness. Li Wei often thought back to that extraordinary day, knowing that the world could always surprise him, and that sometimes, in moments of fear and uncertainty, the best of humanity shines the brightest.